Live chat. Live chat. Jesus fuck. Live stream. That too. Hang on, let me pull my pants up. Oh my gut. Good evening, everyone. If you're new to my live streams, I provide you with the most boring live stream on the planet, where I sit here and pretty much ignore the chat because, I only have two pairs of eyes, and apparently I need them both focused on the same thing at the same time. While I do that, you are welcome to, where I am, it's usually before bed, so if you want to vacuum the house, do some laundry, or maybe just get the dishes done so you don't have to do them in the morning, and you just need someone in the background as a voice in your ear to make you feel like a responsible adult, that's what I'm here for tonight. We'll be putting legs on this guy, and probably arms on this guy. 1996. It was a good year. I was in... I don't remember what year I was in. Alright, yes. Okay. I'm gonna finish watching that. So I need to go to history. It's only a few more minutes left, and then I'm on to something else. I think I almost killed myself earlier.
This price. Maybe we could do some outdoor pillows.
There we go.
Every sunset is a song to
figure out how to do the staircase.
My sales are way down this year.
It's the only room we haven't been in. Maybe this opens. Okay. So, fixed. Nice. Beautiful. Just this. Fourth one's outside. Okay, so maybe it's like... Do you think there's nothing to do with the... I should go this way.
I think I figured out this
Nothing
game.
we can do with
I have to wait till the end, I guess.
It's just like it's actually outside the building.
I got 4 in here, so it should be nice and strong this time.
Here we are again. So yeah, here it says 1 of 4. So that would mean there's one in the school, right? Or do you think the gym counts as a school?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be sneaky.
Isn't the gym part of the school? Why would the gym not be part of the school?
Auditorium. I hope she's still there.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe we get back there later. Or maybe there's like a different little section that's part of the school. Oh, there's a canary there.
I wonder if there are
Hee-hee.
more.
Got it. Well, that's 1 of 1. That's good. Apparently you can get a fire extinguisher later in the game. Oh, okay, so it's backtracking. Okay, let's remember that then. For in the future, that there's still a building in the school that we haven't gotten to. That's okay then. We can leave it for later. Let's try the main doors first. It works. Oh, that's 2.5 hours though. Ooh, cool. That's a very stylish auditorium, I'm just saying. That's very nice looking. Hey, and I think we're gonna leave it here. I'm very excited. We will 100% play more. Like, we're not leaving it here. This game is way too fun. We'll definitely play more of this.
I got some.
That was super fun. I'm so glad we got to try it out for today's sponsored segment. That was Guild.
I love you.
If you
and
are
Big
interested,
Baby is
have our
love.
link. Definitely give it a look. Wishlist on Steam. You can also get it on GOG. It's 4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S. It's available on so many places. I definitely think it's worth checking out if you liked this game.
Did you do a second one yet?
I like it. It's mine. The prices blow my mind. I feel so rich. Yeah.
I don't think she did, but I will check it anyway. That was 4 days ago and you haven't done an update yet? That's disappointing. History. Alright, look, we're going back to fan service with cat girls from space.
Never in her life had Sheila felt as rested and tired at the same time. I know that I should be happy about this, but that boy is trying me up a tree. Weirdly similar but differently used idioms aside, calm, easy go. And if the mention of her name had summoned her, Sheila's voice suddenly rang out through the room. To everyone on board the GES-32, to all crew members, this is Petty Officer Sheila speaking to you. We are...
I just wish they would play automatically.
One of the hooded rats came up to the front of the cage and pressed its little hands against the front glass. James brought his hand to the glass and watched as the rat... When Reprigan arrived at his destination,
Fine.
he had already been too late. The target and his monster friend had already been taken away in order to have some words with the captain himself. A crowd of engineers and mechanics was hurrying in and out of the cabin in their stead, filling the entire corridor. Preparations of the research area.
Okay, let's go back. Oh, hello. Thanks for stopping in. I'm putting legs on this guy right now. But right now, I'm just trying to get something up to listen to, so I'll just be a moment. I hope you had a survivable weekend. And, yeah. What? Fucking damn you! I'm sorry. I'm having one of those moments. Do. Come on, you bastard. Finally. There we go.
Preparations of the research area are completed, ma'am. Their securing of cover is completed, ma'am. Vulnerable crew members have gathered in medical and are all present and accounted for, ma'am. We are ready to proceed. The living spaces are clear for deceleration, ma'am. One after another, the hopefully near final updates of the process of Sheila's team came in over the comm lines. Understood, Sheila answered, while her eyes glided over the different numbers and values on the screen before her eyes. Finish up the last tasks and head back to the bridge afterwards. I'll trust you to coordinate yourselves on that. Copy that, ma'am. Turning to her right, where Cliff was currently handling the messages coming in from all kinds of other teams on board, Sheila asked, everything's clear on our ends? How are things overall? The Raxus expertly coordinated around the incoming information, controlling the terminal with quick, precise movements of all four of his wing-like arms. His head moved seemingly erratically, as his stiff eyes kept shifting focus between different areas of the screen. Nothing to report, ma'am. All areas are clear. We are ready to go. He answered professionally, his tone all business now.
Yep.
All right.
Another monster teapot.
Responded.
I'm going to see if I can get 2 of them done for backup sales.
One was the communications window. In real time, the dock of the GCS was sending them their position and parameters, constantly keeping them updated on the exact numbers and values they would need to allow.
I'm just letting you know I have like a full minute of lag
The other
between when
influence was the
I
actual
see somebody
manual control of the gravitational spin.
and when it comes through.
Of course, it was still
Or when I
inhibited
say
by the
something.
ship's safety system that would not allow any dangerous changes, but overall, she was in control now. The docks of the GCS were basically stations of their own, and so massive that the ships could be flown right into them for docking purposes. For the process of the docking to go smoothly, this meant that the gravitational spin of the dock and the ship had to be synchronized, so that the two vessels would move relative to each other, and therefore appear to be still from their respective perspectives. Since the diameter of the dock was much larger than that of the GES-32, it was relatively slower to maintain standard gravity. Now it was on Shida to make sure that the GES-32's rotation had slowed down enough to match it. Once they'd reached it, as well as doing it in such a controlled fashion, that the deceleration would knock everybody off their feet. Opening the communications to the ship's intercoms one final time today, she loudly announced, "To everyone on board GES-32, to all crew members, this is Petty Officer Shida speaking to you. The deceleration of the gravitational spin will now begin. Brace for lower gravity." Slowly, and with minimal assistance of the board's computer for fine-tuning, she started to power the thrusters, tasked with slowing the ship's tangential velocity. Even though the change was minimal, she immediately felt it in her bones, as inertia tried to keep her body moving at its previous speed. Even though she was used to it, the feeling never got any less weird. The values on her screen dropped in a slow but constant fashion. It wasn't long until the effects were noticeable in more than just the feeling of inertia pulling on her. A feeling like going downwards in an elevator filled her body, as her weight dropped slightly with each second that passed, the artificial gravity pulling on her mass less and less. The process was overall uncomplicated but very time-consuming. Only every now and then did Shida have to make adjustments on short notice, or momentarily stop at deceleration. However, since she had to be sure that she would catch each of these rare instances, she needed to stay sharp and concentrate, other than during her usual shifts in front of this terminal. "We are about to reach 60% of standard gravity, ma'am," after who knows how much time had passed from her right, even though she could see that herself. "Precise assistance is recommended from this point onwards." Shida nodded and gave the computer the order. A command window popped up, and she forwarded the constant stream of information they received from the dock into it, allowing the computer to adjust and adapt to the exact numbers they would need. The last few percentage points separating the values of the ship from the dock dropped down slowly. With the now active assistance, the computer corrected even the smallest deviations, as it returned to its usual function of maintaining the set parameters.
There we go.
Sighing and stretching her neck, Shida finally returned the terminal to its earlier settings, closing her control window, and now taking back up a more supervisory position again. Of course, following protocol, she still technically remained in manual control over the spin, and could act at any moment, but the computer still automatically maintained the parameters that she had inputted, and therefore there wasn't much that she could still do. "Deceleration completed," Shida said towards Cliff, who had also taken a moment to release the tension from his posture. "Inform the other teams and give the all clear. I'll contact the captain." "Yes, ma'am." Cliff confirmed, and started opening the necessary channels. If she was being honest, Shida really didn't want to speak to the captain right now.
Hang on.
She was still quite upset.
Somebody needs to go outside. You want to go outside, Pat?
Come here.
No. You already have all the food. Ugh, fine. Be right back. Cat's being fussy. Crisis averted. so goddamn hot here. Like, it's uncomfortably humid. And I would love just to, like... How do I say this? Ah, fuck it, I'll get demonetized anyway. Like to take my shirt off and do my crafts, but I think I would have to try to switch over to, OnlyFans to do that if I wanted to keep live streaming. Although I could probably actually make money that way. Just sitting here painting with my tits
There
out.
was the additional rumours that were spread, some of them by the two Death Orders themselves, probably had not eased the captain's mind. But duty was duty.
Yeah.
Captain, this is Petty Officer Sheeta. The deceleration was successful, and we are maintaining synchronization with the dock. From our side, all things are clear for the docking process, sir. She dryly informed the captain, via a direct communication line to the captain's seat. Very good, Petty Officer. The captain's voice came back out of the terminal. Keep watch over the parameters, and await further orders coming to you soon. Good. At least he didn't seem to want to small talk. Understood, Captain. Sheeta answered, closing the line.
There we go.
Despite the now extremely low gravity, James and Curie were pressed to the ground, trying to get their faces as close to the glass floor as possible. Moore and Chris stood some paces away from
There we
them,
go.
watching their display with
Hot
concern.
glue is going.
They also showed no desire to get anywhere close to the window that their two friends could not make. James cupped his hands around his eyes, trying to keep out as much light from the ship that caused his face to be reflected in the glass, obscuring his vision of the spectacle surrounding them as possible.
I had,
Dispersed for the empty space surrounding
I slept on the couch last night because I had the dog and she's got the hurt paw, so she's like extra sooky. And there's just a lot of shit in the hallway to get to my room. So I actually, I drank the fan up from the basement last night and had that on and the air conditioner and it was just unreal. Ooh, I finished Baby Shark. Well, I need to add some, gloss.
Forms like a moon-sized ring with its middle filled with brains, giving it structure.
I can't let it play, but it works. So I need to add the gloss to make it all shiny. And yes, Baby Shark is done.
Turning ever so slowly in place. It wasn't actually still, of course.
Okay, while that heats up.
Anything it raced around the galaxy's core with blazing speed. A feat that had taken many engineers many years to achieve when it was first planned. The GCS was situated right at the void, orbiting no close celestial bodies, instead acting as a fixed point in the galactic spiral of the Milky Way itself. It was truly breathtaking in its sheer size alone, and it shone so bright that its light blocked out the vision of most of the surrounding stars.
There we go.
Do we really have to be here of all places? James could hear Moore's voice asking from above. I told you I am not missing this, he answered awestruck, trying to wrap his mind around the sheer amount of material and engineering necessary to construct something like this. But I understand if you want to leave. It must be pretty boring standing over there. Boredom is the least of my concerns, Moore answered. James wanted to reply, but a sudden shift in the light gave him pause. The void of space did not allow sound to travel through it, but he was sure if it did, the massive dock opening up would have made an ear-splitting sound. From his
There
position,
we go.
he could see the giant tube spinning in perfect unison with the ship, so he was always facing the same direction of the dock.
I used, for these teeth, some of them are probably away, but most of them are, Millie Putty.
As the ship slowly flew
It's a 2-part epoxy. See if I got an open one. Hang on. I have a new one. So, yeah, it's kind of like it's plumber's putty. So it's, you mix 2 of them together, equal parts, and, when it dries, it's nice and hard. It's what I use for this stuff. And I don't have to worry about, like, baking it to make it hard. I was going to try Epoxy Sculpt. That was my original plan. But when I did the math for the price of Epoxy Sculpt versus this stuff, this came out cheaper. I think for Epoxy Sculpt on Amazon, it was $60, and at the end of the day, you get a pound or 16 ounces. These guys are 4 ounces each. So I got like 8 of these for the same price, pretty much. So I got like over 2.5 pounds. So And it seems to work pretty good. Although I do need to get some gloves because if I'm going to be using a lot of it, I want to protect myself. Yeah, here it is. No. But while that is sitting there, and while the hot glue is heating up, I'll put the glaze on this. So I use triple thick. I can get it at my local craft store, or I could anyway. And when it dries, it's nice and glossy and gives a nice wet look to all the open wounds and blood.
We don't. It looked like a ghost town. All the machines and posts were abandoned, and not a soul was in sight. It was only logical. After all, the atmosphere had most likely been voided while the ship was entering. Not to mention the danger of sailing this close to a running spaceship, if anyone were to still be in the dock while they entered. When the ship had reached what was probably its end position, enormous robotic arms, attached to the dock, started to move towards it and attached to the hull, keeping the ship in place. A small jerk went through the ship as the metals collided with each other. This meant that the thrusters were most likely powered off now. And finally, if he pressed himself to the glass hard enough and strained his eyes, James could see a large metal exit ramp slowly start to emerge from the dock's floor, spiraling around the ship rotation-wise. He knew it was soon also attached to the ship and form their way out and into the dock. Of course, they would have to wait for the atmosphere to be reinstated first. "You're safe now," James commented, finally lifting his head again and looking over at Moore. No void of space anymore, just the void of the dock. Moore carefully skulked over towards the window, glancing out of it from her position. "Oh, thank goodness," she said with a relieved breath, and immediately started walking over towards him, followed by Quiz. "You two truly must be out of your minds staring into it like this." "I thought you knew that already," James responded, while lifting himself off the ground and dusting himself off. "It is calming," Curie stated, while also lifting their body back up. "And the stations are a true marvel." "That they are," James confirmed while stretching. Moore seemed to shudder a bit, but apparently James's comment had reminded her that her concerns were not new to the two of them, so she didn't press the issue. A small knocking sound against the wall informed James that Quiz had something to say as well. "I'm glad you had fun, but we should get going soon," they signed, while moving their eyes back and forth between James and Curie. "I'm sure they'll want you in the first group." "The first group?" Not quite understanding what they meant by that, James simply gave the sign for explain towards them, while looking quizzically. Instead of explaining themselves, Quiz looked over at Moore, who took it as a signal to explain it for them. "People react differently to changing gravity. Some have it better than others, and you do not seem to be affected at all," she said disapprovingly. Apparently James hadn't read the ship's protocols quite well enough for her taste, and would have to rectify that soon. "Since the process of getting everybody off the ship, onto the dock, and then from the dock to the station is quite laborious, there are measures in place to not unnecessarily hold it up. One of those being that the groups first leaving the ship are those that have little to no problem with the changing gravity, giving the ones staying behind an opportunity to fully acclimate, while not making anyone who doesn't need to wait for them." That did make some sense. And in that case, James would most likely be in the first group. James looked down the corridor.
Alright, and stick just right in there.
Running his hands over his uniform to try and straighten out some of the folds that are folds, while laying on the ground in it. "Also,
There we go.
James,
See if
I
they're
have been
separated
to ask
again.
you." Moore once more spoke up, a tone changing to one James couldn't quite place. "What are you
That
going
tooth
to
is
do about your identifier, your uniform?" That was the word. "What are you going to do about your uniform?" James looked up at her and then down at himself again.
I'm gonna put this guy aside, let him dry, and then I will put a little super glue on that tooth to make sure it doesn't come out
You
again.
seem to always be wearing it, and you also said that you dislike being undressed before, Moore said. Then her claw started to indicate towards the area around her neck as she continued. "However, since we are not working on the station, we will not be wearing our identifiers there. Of course, most people would simply take
I would like to use the light UV resin. don't have it. I have like a little tiny tube of it right
She
now.
actually reached for her identifier, taking it off from around her neck, and haphazardly stuffing it into the large purse-like bag she was carrying with her on a strap around her shoulders. And that most likely contained everything she was going to take along onto the station. So, should I change? James asked. He unwittingly used the galactic uniform to change, forgetting for a moment that it carried different implications in the context of the conversation. Moore, understandably misunderstanding his question, hastily replied, "Of course, that was not what I was saying. If you're uncomfortable with taking it off, I'm sure we will find a different solution. I was merely trying to tell you what people usually do." James was dumbfounded by her reaction for a moment, and looked at her quizzically. This seemed to now also confuse Moore, who looked back at him with the same expression. "I'm not that attached to it," James finally said with an awkward laugh after a while, and started walking over towards the suitcase, which he had deposited at the edge of the large window. "If it's a problem, I'll wear something else." Actually, it was anything but uncomfortable to get the out of uniform for. It was a good thing he had planned to go out in casual sometime anyway. That way, he had packed plenty of his own clothes. Since he expected the station to be at the standard temperature, he would gladly wear summer clothes over the long sleeve uniform. So he opted for a light grey short sleeve dress shirt instead of a t-shirt.
There we go. I got that time. That's the call mummy time. Hi everyone, welcome to the live stream. I'm putting legs on a teapot with eyeballs on it. And I'm calling my mummy to wish her good night right now. Alright, just stop fucking with it till it sets. Ring, bitch. We got some weather happening here, so the call might not go through. Ugh, come on. Come on, come on. Yeah. Come on. Yep, come on. It's your daughter calling to say goodnight. Call me back. Love you. Bye. Assuming she gets it. Alrighty. I have some 2-part resin that I want to make some light switches with, that I intended to make some light switches with, but never got around to it. Alrighty. I'll set this aside. I will secure it in place with later. Yada-da-da. Yeah, the rope's free right now, but I will bend them down and shape them before I start putting layers on them of, you know, other epoxy and stuff. Okay. Okay. In the meantime, someone's getting a dinosaur head. Alright. Need a bigger drill bit for this. And a stick. Hi, baby. You need to stretch it on them steps, aren't you? Where's the... Hello? Nothing, just call and say goodnight. Alright, good night, Mom. Love you. There we go. This'll only hurt for a minute. Or 3. What happened to the stick? Where's the stick? Oh, well. You go over there. Hat! We're fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. Oh yeah, nails. I do have some nail crystals. Anyway, this guy is getting this head. So I have said so. Okay, so what angle? So only hurt if I miss. Get in the head. Get in there. Shit. Okay, okay. We'll wiggle you a bit more. Alright. Try that again. That's better. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I didn't need the side done. It's not going to be perfect. I just need it close enough so when I go in with the clay, it'll be easier to build up, so I don't have to be so thin with it. Yep. Okay, that looks good to me. Give that a second to add here. Has anyone been on TikTok lately and seen the thing that can make anyone sing anything? Like Johnny Cash can sing anything, and Elvis Presley's is anyway. Plankton. I don't know. Diamonds in the Night, Diamonds in the Sky, or whatever. And Plankton from SpongeBob was singing it, and he's just screaming and fucking amazing. Alright. Hot, hot. We're going in anyway. I want it to have a little bit of a personality, so it's going to be looking kind of off to the side there. Going to definitely have to repaint it because the eyes are crooked AF. I'm just glad I managed to take the head off without taking the arm as well. Although I guess you can get a tile drill bit or a tile cutting bit, and that's going to be really good for me and these things. Shit, fiddles. Just enough for you to stay okay, buddy? There you go. So, yeah. He's got his head on. I will match his new head up with his neck later. And, yeah. Oh, what's that shiny thing? Oh, the fucking hot glue strings. But anyway, you're wondering what I'm going to do with the body of this guy? The body of this guy? This his original body? Hang on. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with him. He came with a little dinosaur roar. So, definitely not going to throw this out. So what I'm probably gonna do is I'm thinking eyeballs. I think there's a character in D&D called like the All-Seeing Eye or something, where it's just like a giant eyeball with like little eyeballs coming off of it, and I'm thinking that would make a lovely head. Like an all-seeing eye T-Rex monster thing. Anyway, the button makes it look like it's got a dick. Anyway, that's the plan for that guy. Okay. Oh, gotta unplug you before I burn myself again. Alright. Now, I think I'm gonna bust out the polymer clay. So I think this guy needs some tentacles coming out of all of the windows. Where's the front? There's the front. Okay. Yeah, there was a big yard sale on Saturday, so I scored pretty good. Alright, I'm listening to shit.
Alongside it, he wore over-knee shorts of the same colour, although they were checked by light blue lines running across them. He changed right then and there in the hallway, knowing that nobody would bat an eye at him standing around in his underwear for a moment. That's better, he loudly said, immediately feeling a lot less hot while closing his suitcase back up. He then turned to his group of friends. What do you think? He asked. Twirling in place for a second to give them an all-round view. Can I show myself in public like this? He only got hesitant answers, since clearly none of them had any idea what would be the right thing to say. I think there might be someone else you will want to ask, Lord said, being the first to clearly speak up. I'm sure she'll have plenty to say about it, James responded laughingly, picking up his suitcase and getting ready to get moving. But
I need
most
something
people
else.
look at me much more like you are doing than like she is, so I want to hear your thoughts. It looks just as weird as always. With a sigh, with brutal honesty. Yes, to be honest, that you are covered in clothes at all will leave much more of an impression than what you are wearing. Moore answered bluntly. I do not think people will be able to tell the difference between good and bad clothes, but at least we are seeing your arms and legs now.
That
James
is
looked at the
softener.
scarf speckles.
Where's the other one?
The most prominent of which, of course, being those left by Sheila
Okay.
herself.
Where is it?
Will those really be less off-putting than sleeves to the average person? At least neither Moore
Where is
nor
it?
Quinn seem to be bothered by them in the slightest.
Just looking for that thing that I had, like, 2 days ago that I was using and now I need
Bring
again.
a nice bit of positivity.
So it shouldn't be that far. So naturally it's buried
Well,
under all the
at
shit.
least nothing's changing. James got over his own shrug
Okay.
and started in the direction of the area where the ramp would connect to the ship. While they started walking, their conversation was momentarily interrupted by the ship's intercoms, informing them that the ship was now docked, and to get ready to leave in an orderly fashion. Honestly, they should think about always having the gravity like this, Moore commented while they crossed the empty corridors, straightening her arms and shoulders. Apparently, feeling
Where is
almost
it?
half of her weight lifted off of her was doing great things for her rolled bones. It's not as nice as it might sound, James responded, being personally used to living way under his species' preferred gravity by now.
Oh, there it is. Found it! Found it behind another teapot.
In fact, at that moment he had to walk very slowly, as their current gravity had to be only about 20% of that surf.
There we go.
Serious
I'm back.
he would try to take would turn into a jump. However, the thought of her rage did bring something back into James's mind, and he had somehow completely blocked out in his excitement
I
about
have some
docking,
ideas. I absolutely understand that.
trying to see if she
And I've come to the conclusion that you don't have to start to finish anything. You can just start projects. And you don't have to finish them, but you can, like the teapots. One day I did the eyes. 3 days later I put the legs on. It's probably going to be another 2 days before I get back to them and put the other, and do the wraps for the legs for the next step. So yeah. You could just work on things in projects, like have 2 or 3 things going at the same time. That was much more than necessary. Ooh, stick. But yeah. And then one day you'll just sit down and you'll be like, I'm gonna finish something, and you'll just have like 5 or 6 things in front of you, and they're just gonna snap together and you'll feel like super extra double productive. Or at least that's what I tell myself. When I get like that.
was going to continue speaking or if she had just made an offhand comment. As she was seemingly dumb for the moment, he carefully spoke up instead. So, this kind of went under earlier when it really shouldn't have, but apparently I'm the worst friend ever and have somehow completely missed you being a mother more. He winced a bit while saying it, hoping that him mentioning it would not restart her agitation at the topic. But Moore had seemingly found her peace with that, at least for the moment, and instead looked really amused by his coyness. Well, you really do not tend to ask many questions of the people around you, James, she answered, in a faintly criticizing tone. The lightness of her steps and the lower gravity also reflected in the way she was talking while walking, and she sounded much less strange than usual. But you are right. I am a mother of 3 beautiful children. 3 children? So he'd been way off. Immediately, questions came up, of course. Questions about the children towards her presumable husband or boyfriend or maybe donator, who probably had to exist for her to be able to have children. However, this might also be a sore topic for Aaron's, maybe even something that wasn't exactly his place to ask about. Even asking about her children's gender could be a source of aggravation, he knew from experience. And how old were they? Was the only question he could come up with that he couldn't imagine causing any problems. Putting it simply, they are all more or less 1 uniform year apart in age. My youngest daughter, Kenstar, is about...
Just a minute. Gravity got the best of everything there for a minute. Just give me a second. Are you okay? Since you're flying. There we go. I think I got that upside down. Are you upside down? No, it righted itself. Okay. Were we talking about anything, or was I just listening to that? I think I tuned out. Psst, 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 psst. Come here, you fuzznut. We want to go outside? Come downstairs. All right.
It's twice your age.
It seems to automatically correct when it's like one or the other, but not if it's like horizontal versus vertical.
And my youngest, Hunwa, is about your age now, if only just. That did at least clear up names, ages, and presumably genders, so it had apparently been a good question to ask. However, he was stumped as to how to continue the conversation. Anything else? Moore inquired while looking down to him. Well, he answered uncomfortably, wanting to ask questions but not knowing which questions he could ask. He battered his brain, trying to conjure up all the social skills in his body, while looking at Moore, conciliatorily. From over his head, he could hear Quiz making some sounds he couldn't quite place. Some sort of soft croaks, escaping them in short bursts. Wait, were they laughing at him? Well, that is understandable. Your mind is currently quite, let us say, preoccupied, after all. Moore commented, semi-amused. In that moment, James wasn't sure if she was really bad at hiding this sass in her voice, or really good at pretending that she was. These are thrilling times for you, so I cannot expect you to show interest towards the life of some old woman like myself. Not if there is someone so much more exciting occupying your thoughts.
Oh my.
Why did this feel like he had just completely lost control over this conversation? Listen, you know it's not like that, James quickly said, trying to keep his voice steady instead of having it break into misplaced embarrassment under the comment. This seemed to amuse Quiz further, their laughter rising in frequency. Moore shook her large head left and right, her fur wildly swinging in the low gravity. Now, James, there is no need to explain yourself. We've all been young once, she said, and now James was sure she knew exactly what she was doing. Sadly, short of just ending the talk then and there wasn't much he could do about it. While he thought, Moore happily continued her monologue.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
You have to have your priorities in order, after all, and I am more than old enough to understand where my place is. She was taking it a bit far now. All right, I get it, James Foley interrupted her, his voice not quite as calm and collected as he had wished to make it. He raised his hands as if to physically stop the conversation. I'm not good at these things, all right? I know that. Moore looked down at him, with the eye facing him, and to his surprise she brought one of her claws up, running it smooth side up and down along his exposed triceps area. As he confusedly looked up at her, her face showed an emotion he couldn't yet place. Yes, I know, James, she said in an earnest tone, the sass having disappeared from her voice completely. But not everyone will be as fortunate. Asking questions is important and natural, especially personal ones. They let people know that you see value in knowing them. And if someone is uncomfortable with them, that is something you have to respect after they have let you know, not on the assumption that it might be that way. James looked up at her with big eyes, as what she said only slowly sank in with him. Purely out of force of habit that he had developed in situations similar to these, and in a way that almost every human would almost immediately recognize and had probably used themselves before, James put on a half-mocking, half-affectionate tone, and said in a slow and drawn-out way, "Yes, Mom." He should have known that that wasn't something universally understood. In fact, he actually knew that, since he immediately recognized his mistake. Given the situation, it was in his poor taste. However, his tongue had been faster than his mind this time. He saw Moore look at him, quite taken aback. He also felt Quiss's and curious eyes on him from outside of his vision. He could feel the blood rushing to his face, and this time, he really was embarrassed. Taking a deep breath, he once more raised his arms and mumbled, "Okay, I can explain." A moment of silence, then Quiss broke out into their so far biggest bit of loud croaking, apparently not even bothering to try and restrain themselves anymore. To James's bigger surprise, Curie's synthetic voice now also rang out, imitating what sounded like human laughing almost uncomfortably well. Moore's reaction was more restricted, only resulting in a small chuckle. "Sometimes I do forget," she said understatedly. James, now also chuckling awkwardly, not quite sure what was so funny, could only respond with, "Forget?" Moore nodded. "Yes, sometimes I forget that it is actually a brain working on your head and not a processor," she admitted in her restrained amusement.
Okay, how many arms are up to? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Admittedly, he had been a bit
Really?
reserved
Only
when
halfway
he
there?
some stuff since he had entered the ship, but he hadn't been that cold, had he? "I knew I was bad at this," he said, diffidently, rubbing his neck. "But I didn't think I was that bad." Moore shook out her fur, a lot more forcefully than she usually did due to the low gravity. "That is not what I mean," she said mildly. A knock above his head, James looked up and towards Quiss. "James, don't worry. We know that you are an affectionate person." They signed down towards him, as he simply observed from below. "But boy, you have to be aware that most of the time you seem to be completely untouchable." "I don't understand," James had to admit. He wasn't keeping up with the conversation anymore. By now, he wasn't embarrassed as much as he was completely lost. Quiss and Moore looked at each other for a moment, as James looked around between the two. With a gesture of her hand, Moore indicated Quiss that they should be the one to keep explaining. "You are not a cold person, James. We are not suggesting that. At least not as long as you want to be."
I go to the dentist tomorrow morning. I'll see if I can get some more tools.
"However, I don't know if this is a human..."
Yes, you can just ask your dentist for old tools. These ones I've pretty much broken the tips off all of them during my crafting because, you know, carving rock and stuff. Dentist tools were good for a little bit, but not forever. So yeah, I need to get some more of these.
Is exactly that. Your choice. Most of the time, everything you do and every emotion that you show seems to be like something you let happen, rather than something that happens to you. It's like you can just flip a switch every so often and stuff doesn't get you anymore. Of course, slip-ups happen, but they appear to be the exception rather than the norm. That didn't sound like him, at least to his ears. Perhaps Sheeta said something similar? About wires and bolts? No, that's a reference with stamina. Still, there may 2 times he had been called a robot by aliens.
Yeah.
"I think you may be exaggerating a bit," he replied, trying to wave it off. Moore, who still sounded amused, interjected. "James, I have personally seen you have your arm ripped open and joke about it seconds after. You dove into a recently exploded and currently burning laboratory, and apparently T-Sheeta with stories of body replacements almost right after. From what I have heard, all that a test of stopping weapons on you could do was mostly bore you after, and that is only stating the obvious. We are not exaggerating." "Well, when you put it like that," James mused out loud, and scratched his cheek. Actually, it was a good question, now that he thought of it. Most of those were things that he could see other humans do, theoretically.
1, 2, 3, 4,
But he
5,
also
6,
knew that it
6,
wasn't
7.
too likely
Ugh.
that many would react like him. "The only time you ever seem to get your scales cracked is when it is either about Sheeta or Curie. Quist continued Moore's explanation, bobbing their body up and down while signing. Hey, now you're being unfair, James countered with a slight amusement. I would react the same way if it was about any of you. I've just never seen you get into trouble. Then he thought about it for a bit and continued. I guess you're right, though. I just don't really let stuff get to me, so it doesn't bother me when I'm the only one being affected. While he said that, he thought about past events when he had gotten bent out of shape. Most of those, indeed, weren't about him. Some of his thoughtfulness must have leaked into his voice, because after hearing his response, Quist quickly signed. I smell a story behind that. From the looks of it, Moore seemed to share that, as Sergei seemed very interested in that right now. James chuckled and brushed his hair out of his face. Well, now that we have the chance, I should probably tell it to you over a drink or something, he said grinningly. We can make a night of it. I'm sure there are plenty of stories between all of us. That would also create an environment in which he would feel comfortable asking some questions, even if he didn't mention that right there.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There we go.
More jokingly
I think that's all the cards that this guy needs. You can go over there.
James answered with a laugh. I won't try to get out of it.
Alright, what's next on my list? Baby Shark is still drying and still sticky as hell. Yeah. Alright, come here. I'll get the dentals out for the teeth. It seems to be clobbing a bit, so I'll get the globs off. There we go. Can't play it or I get demonetized. Like it matters. I'm slowly gaining some ground when it comes to whatchamacallit. My AdSense time to 4,000, but it's very hard to make actual videos, so it's easier to do the live streams, but the live streams don't give you any live time. They only give you time after you've uploaded the live stream, and then people go back to watch it, which fucking sucks. So, balls. Oh, what else? Okay, you're drying. I'm done with you. Oh, work on this for a minute. That's good.
A general bit of laughter ensued. Nothing really funny had happened. They just all felt like laughing. As James ended his own bout of laughter, he took a deep breath, letting it out with a small, satisfied sigh, regaining his composure. For a moment, everyone was silent. Hey, James! Curie's voice rang out right next to him, breaking the silence. What's up, Curie? He responded, turning towards his cyborg companion. I like the way that you are, they said, looking at him with those big, red eyes of theirs. Oh, thank you, Curie, James answered, suppressing his urge to pull them in and lay his arm around their shoulders. Instead, he just looked at them honestly. I like you too. After that, the group quickly arrived at their destination, stepping right into a large crowd of people, waiting right at the exit ramp, and being semi-organized by the present security guards. James looked around, seeing some familiar faces, but not the one he was looking for. I'm guessing the ranking crew stays on the ship a bit longer, he mused, as people he knew to be in the crew were completely absent from the first group of people to leave the ship. Although they were slightly harder to distinguish, now that nobody was wearing their identifiers. Well, they were absent except for one. Of course he would be here, he thought, looking at his own personal shadow, Officer Reprique himself. Moore answered his query calmly while looking around, trying to follow his gaze.
Alright, you wanna go outside? Let's
I
go.
will stay until the process is completed. You will have to wait a bit until Sheeta can join us.
James made an acknowledging sound as the security guard, whom he recognized as the one who had maced him just a day prior, approached them.
I guess you should be in the first group,
He said, clearly addressing James, although his eyes were pretty much glued to Curie as he neared them.
Follow me, please.
James and Curie got ready, but Moore turned to Quist before she moved.
I will see you on board.
She said, causing James and Curie to turn on the spot. Quist was waving goodbye as they looked at them. Oh!
Okay, he's outside.
quickly making a few steps back to probably say goodbye as well. Yeah, see you. Curie just waved back at Quiz. Then they followed the guard towards the entrance of the ramp. It was a bit weird seeing this giant hallway that had suddenly just attached to the wall of the ship, behind of which usually just lay the boiler space. The guard was studying his assistant intently, making some inputs every now and then. All right, we're just waiting for the all clear from the dock, he finally said, looking up and addressing the group before them.
This shit sucks.
I'll have to ask you not to dawdle in the dock and immediately make your way to the shuttle as soon as you get out of the ramp. We have an entire ship to evacuate, after all. A myriad of sounds of confirmation sounded out from the crowd, while James merely nodded his head. He couldn't help but notice more, interestingly eyeing the guard while he talked.
Okay, I don't feel like scraping that down, so I was going over to the corner for a bit.
Had a nice bubble of personal space around them, which James attributed to
Over
Curie's
here,
presence.
that's one over here.
The dock didn't make them wait long, and the all clear was quickly given, beginning their exodus off the ship. In an orderly fashion, the crew members stepped into the ramp, slowly marching along its spiral. James had to admit, even in this low gravity, walking an incline while the gravity slightly increased with each step you took was oddly taxing. He didn't even want to imagine how it felt for those around him whose muscles went hardened in super high gravity. Most of them huffed and puffed before making the march. He did note that Rapri didn't seem to have a problem with it. The officer wasn't even bothering to try to hide right now, which was logical, but still had odd traits. In the end, their way was only so long, and the end of the ramp was quickly reached as they stepped out into the large area of the dock. As the workers already waited, quickly hurrying them along. James looked around in awe. It reminded him of the first time he had stepped into a large airport, having to wrap his mind around the unreasonably high ceilings. Now he stood in the colossal tube and was able to look up and see an entire spaceship just chilling out right above him in the middle of the room. Having walked the halls of the GES-32 for months now, he needed a bit to process that it could really just be flown right into the dock. The smooth, metallic outside of the ship, only interrupted by the window corridors that looked way similar from the outside than from the inside, and some faucets sticking out as metal tubes here and there, reflected the light shown onto it by the surrounding dock. He was really glad he didn't have megalophobia right now, looking at the mind-blowing sizes of the machinery around him. Even though they started moving immediately, their way through the massive dock was long, and it took them some time of trotting after the workers before they had reached the shuttle ramp.
Oh, shit. No.
The way up and strap in, one of the workers unenthusiastically ordered, as the massive airtight door opened in front of them, revealing a empty room with an even bigger gate on its other side, most likely leading out into the void. In the middle of the room, a shuttle was waiting for them, its entrance ramp wide open. It looked surprisingly a lot like the space shuttles that Earth had long ago used in a discontinued space program, at least form-wise. Then again, there probably weren't much better ways to design what was essentially a bus from space. Just snap wings and a thruster on a regular bus, make it a bit more aerodynamically later. Even though there was no aerodynamic core, and there you go. Not a shuttle. Keeping previous interactions in mind, James decided to make Curie have the place right at the wall, taking up his own position next to them. He wondered if the shuttle was selected with the people making up their group of minds, since nobody seemed to have any problems with the seats offered to them. Although he did feel a little silly, since the seats were much larger than himself, making him feel like a child, while strapping himself in with the padded safety belts. An alarm quickly appeared, as multiple red lines of text, as the pilot informed them, "Ready for takeoff, brace yourselves." The whole process was streamlined beyond belief. On Earth, this process would take at least another half an hour before they could get going. Muffled by the shuttle's walls, James could hear the enormous gate outside open, even though he couldn't see it due to the shuttle's lack of any windows. And with a jolt, they started to move. The very same lack of windows didn't allow him to have any perception of how their flight was advancing. So he was stuck looking around the shuttle's interior, or at the other crew members, until he felt the shuttle decelerating again. Most people around seemed a lot more nervous about the whole process than he was, which confused him, since this was only his second time in a small craft like this. He had claustrophobia to the list of fears he was especially happy to not have to pay. With another jolt, feeling like a reverse of the plans they had apparently landed. "We have arrived. A moment of patience while the atmosphere has been reinstated, please." The pilot said. James wondered how fast they had flown to arrive here so quickly. The whole thing just felt so unceremonious to him. A feeling that wasn't helped once they were allowed to leave the shuttle, and immediately were hurried out of the room once more. The landing area looked much like the room they had taken off in, as if they had come out of the same mold. The gates opened, and James distractedly stepped out, wondering if the rooms were indeed designed with the exact same blueprints.
The crew of the GS-32? A voice asked from the front of the group, causing James to funny look forward,
shit.
and his eyes widened.
He had expected to step into some sort of welcoming area, where they could be recorded or checked in or something. But instead, the landing area had opened right into the thick of it, allowing them to step out into what looked like the galaxy's biggest mall. People were hustling and bustling around them in all shapes and sizes, using many walkways
Head's coming off.
mid-air, apparently being separated by the speed and size of their users. He counted at least 3 each of 4 different kinds of walkways, with exits off them every 100 meters or so. Further above them, what like rails were attached to the walls with long support beams. And here and there, James could even see what it looked like on docks slowly drive along below the incredibly high ceilings. The area was littered with all types of markets or services, many of which he couldn't even fathom right that second, and it looked like an entire continent had exploded on the area around him. He was so awestruck when he stepped from the sterile dock right into what appeared to be the heart of life on the station, that he didn't even notice the owner of the voice that had spoken to them.
Oh, and you must be his resident human, right? Welcome aboard,
It said. Surprised to be addressed directly, James shot around. Out of habit, he already lifted his head to try and look the probably much larger person in the face while talking to them. However, even then his eyes had to move up, and they kept moving up. James had met many people since he entered space, many of them unsettling to the human mind. However, this was the first time that his triple F instinct really kicked in, and his brain screamed, "Run!"
Okay. I'm gonna pause that. And that's 14. I'm gonna go for 15. Okay, don't need that. So jobs posted. Down, tummy. Let's see. Do. Come on. Come on, young motherfucker. That fits pretty well. I gotta do some work though. Always gotta do some work. Okay, that was 40.
We are doing a sponsored stream today for Guilt.
I already figured it out. Tips. History. Come on, bring me up to the other one. Wait, didn't I just do? Yeah. Okay, that's 14. Did I just watch 14?
Preparations of the research area are completed, ma'am. The securing of cargo is completed, ma'am. Vulnerable crew members have gathered in medical and are all present and accounted for, ma'am. We are ready to proceed. The living spaces are clear for deceleration, ma'am. One after another, the hopefully near final updates of the process of Sheeta's team came in over the comm lines. Understood, Sheeta answered, while her eyes glided over the different numbers and values on the screen before her eyes. Finish up the last tasks and head back to the bridge afterwards. I'll trust you to coordinate yourself on that. Copy that, ma'am. Turning to her rooms, where Cliff was currently handling the messages coming in from all kinds of other teams on board, she'd asked, everything's cleared on our ends? How are things overall? The Raxus expertly coordinated around the incoming information, controlling the terminal with quick, precise movements of
Yeah.
4 wing-like arms. His
Yeah, okay, there we go. I need the actual screwdriver.
Instead of running, James had frozen up, finding his own instincts as he forced himself to remain rooted in place, despite every single red alert in his head going off at maximum volume. His eyes remained locked on the owner of the voice that had welcomed them to the great community station. He had often described a fair few of his crew members as giants. Seeing as they stood twice the height of a tall human, that had always felt appropriate. However, compared to the Colossus that was staring down at him now, they were just as dwarfed as he was. James had, of course, known that megafauna wasn't quite as extinct on other planets as it was on Earth, but seeing it in person was something else. He wasn't the best at identifying species by looking at them, especially since he never bothered to learn everyone's exact identifying features. But there was no question what was now standing before him. They dwarfed everyone around with their massive body, which was covered in greenish, greyish, wrinkly skin, with fur covering it only sparingly.
Damn it.
Their legs were basically tree trunks, ending in round, four-clawed feet, the back legs being only half the length of their front ones, giving them a towering appearance as they held themselves up. Upwards, their enormous oval body ended in a long neck, leading to a massive elongated head. It was far above the ground, so judging its exact size was hard, but James assumed that the head alone was probably bigger than he was. Large, thin, seal-like ears hung off of it and flapped in a constant motion, as if the head was trying to fly away from his body with them. The 4 eyes he could see appeared to be nothing but black dots in James's position, and he expected there might be more that he didn't spot. And the most unsettling thing was the huge, split trunk growing out of their face right under them. It emerged as a single, thick appendage,
There we
but it was
go.
splitting into 2 separate tubes about a third across its length, probably to be used like arms. The monstrous visage was rounded out by the 4 enormous tusks growing out of its wide mouth, with 2 of them pointing upwards and 2 pointing downwards. Yep, that was a Zudatios, all right. The biggest sentient species discovered to date, as well as one of the most important core world dwellers and a found species of the community. What they also were was goddamn terrifying. James didn't think in orders as much as many others seemed to do. But if this didn't scream proboscidea, James didn't know what would. Elephants on Earth were scary enough, and this looked like an elephant had been filled with a straight nightmare fuel for his whole life. He could feel Moore, who was also looking up at their creature, albeit way less terrified, nudge him in the shoulder. Yes, that would be me, James managed to get out, snapping out of his stupor at least the slightest bit. The Colossus bowed down a bit and tilted their head in a way that they could focus on him with a single one of their eyes, although James was still shivering, busted barely being able to see him.
No batteries.
Faramore has told me quite a lot about you.
Might still
I
work.
may come out to greet my guests personally, but after having so many humans come through in large groups, I am interested to meet a single one in person, they said, their voice booming louder than before.
I'll put the
Was
screw
he
back.
just imagining that? In what must have been a natural gesture for them, they reached down with one end of their trunk and tried to touch his head with it. James, however, was having none of that and avoided the appendage with great prejudice, making it very clear that he did not wish to be touched. The Titan's head tilted a bit further, possibly in confusion, as they pulled the appendage back. Oh, I am sorry, they said, after a few seconds of just looking at him. I forgot myself for a moment there. Excuse my manners.
but you just look so adorable.
James was a bit more insulted by that than he should. After all, he had had the same thoughts about some of his crew members before, so he shouldn't judge someone for thinking the same way about him. Still, something about it coming from specifically this person didn't sit right with him. Shaking his head and trying to get the remaining shock out of his system with very limited success, he forces himself to speak. Your guests? James asked, changing the subject without acknowledging their statement and giving them a silly, upset look, even though he was quite sure they wouldn't be able to interpret it, if they could even see his face. The person lifted both ends of their trunk into the air, forming a sort of Y shape, as they answered.
Oh, once again, you must excuse my manners. I haven't introduced myself yet.
Their massive legs began to move, stomping around in place a bit while trying to get into what James assumed to be a more respectful position.
I am High Matriarch Aboginorana Oxtoxia Trua, the leader supreme of this great station, reinstated for more than 22 times now,
they pompously said, and moved their head to what James was assuming was supposed to be some kind of bow.
It is my pleasure to welcome you under my care.
The pleasure is ours. Moore was the first to answer, seeing as they now all were addressed, and also took a bow next to James. I am Moore Bistray. James, who wasn't much in the mood for theatrics, merely tonelessly gave his name. James Orwin. Curie, a bit an austere need to introduce themselves, and remained silent. Waiting out some comments made by the other crew members around him towards the High Matriarch, James eyed them suspiciously. Almost likely he should say her, as the title of Matriarch suggested. Now that his head wasn't constantly telling him to run it, instead just filling him with a deep sense of impending doom, he did have to say, she was indeed an imposing figure in more than just its size. If nothing else, James did know a dangerous woman when he saw one. Only after she had graciously accepted the wave of respect and praise coming her way from the crew of the GES-32, did her attention fully return to him, of all people, as she apparently waited for him to say something. You said you are the leader here, High Matriarch? He started, not really knowing what she expected him to say, but also not wanting to be any ruder than he already was, as he felt he had reached a pretty good level of rudeness so far. He actually wanted to continue his sentiment into a question of what the leading position entailed exactly, but he was interrupted by a deep voice coming from behind him.
And quite the leader she is.
Pheromone moved on.
There we go.
Slowly trotting over to where they
Alright,
were
now I
standing.
gotta cover you up.
James shot around. What the hell was he doing here? Wasn't he supposed to still be on board? Then he realized that he had accidentally turned his back to the Titan in front of him, panicked, and immediately turned back around, fixating the matriarch with his gaze. With him, the captain had also brought an entourage of presumably high-ranking crew members, none of which James recognized, although one of them did match Sheeta's description of the creepy tree person that had signed off on her leave. James hadn't even noticed that people had kept leaving the docking bay behind him, while he was fixated on the colossal matriarch. The process was even more streamlined than he had given it credit for.
Pheromone, you old charmer. Aboard already?
Madame Tua, as James decided to call her instead of her full tongue twister of a name, said in front as he slowly approached. Once he had reached them, the Titan once again extended her trunk downward, stroking over Captain Uton's back a bit. Right. She had said the captain did talk about him, so they definitely knew each other.
I hope our resident force of nature isn't giving you any trouble, Rana.
Uton continued, once they were done with their strange greeting.
Oh, I don't know. He looks harmless to me.
Madame Tua answered, throwing a sideways glance at James. Out of the corner of his eye, James could have sworn he could make out the form of Reprieve, shaking his head at that, which gave him a weird sense of amused satisfaction. Although, she wasn't quite wrong. Even as a Death Worlder, how would one ever fight something that big, especially without a weapon? He had a feeling that the word prey species didn't exactly apply to Zodiatos, even if they would probably describe themselves that way. James threw a help-seeking look over at Moore and Curie, as it seemed that the two authority figures in front of him were hell-bent on pulling him into a conversation. Moore seemed to be keeping some sort of respectful distance from the exchange,
Okay.
while Curie looked about as enthused about the subject of talking to the matriarch as James felt. For now,
Ah.
he seemed to be on his own.
Ooh, shooting pains. Ow!
Yeah, harmless, totally, he said nervously, and avoided directly looking at the matriarch's face as much as he could, while also not letting her out of his sight. His heart was pounding in his ears, making it hard to concentrate. Madame Tua seemed quite enthused that he was taking part in the conversation. At least, that is what James thought the expression on her giant face meant.
Well, mostly harmless. Luton commented with a low chuckling voice. Well, one or two instances of chaos here and there. I'm sure it is nothing we can't handle,
Madame Tua explained, with some sort of trumpeting sound escaping her, probably as a standard for a farm.
We have hordes of humans covering here at most times, so a single one shouldn't cause any problems.
The two ends of her trunk swayed around while she talked, and James wasn't quite sure if that was some sort of nervous tip,
No.
or actually necessary for her to make the right sounds while speaking. However, it did keep his eyes locked on the appendage, as he wanted to be constantly aware of it in case of any further attempts at contact from the behemoth.
I'm sure you have it handled.
The captain responded, while still sounding quite amused. For some reason, this whole conversation felt like it wasn't about the topic at hand, and James didn't like that at all.
With a guest as special as this, you can wager your fur on that, Paramore.
Madame Tua answered, and quickly waved her trunk at the captain. Then she turned her attention back to be focused completely on James, much to his dismay.
While we are speaking of it, you have to join me at the table sometimes, Mr. Aldwin.
She said, in what James could only assume was the Zodatios' version of a sickly sweet tone, even though it still sounded like a rumble to his ears.
I will have the
Yep.
cooks fix up something delectable for the two of us. Your people have such great appetites for their small bodies. And then we can talk all about your experiences of being integrated into the community.
He wanted to decline. He really wanted to decline. He really, really wanted to decline. But, all things considered, being invited to eat with the leader supreme of the great community station was probably a very high honor that one doesn't pass up on without either a very good reason or serious repercussions. So against his better judgment, he answered, "It would be an honor, High Matriarch." Madame Tua's ears began to flutter a bit faster hearing his answer.
Well, if you are already going to invite him, why not make it a full tour?
The captain chimed in once more, causing James to frame a betrayed look.
You said it yourself, after all. He is quite the special guest.
I'm gonna make a
Wonderful
purse out of the
idea,
head.
Paramore.
Not gonna have the ears on it, but that's okay.
Bringing one end of her trunk down to briefly touch the captain's back before she turned her attention towards James.
What do you say, Mr. Aldwin? A guided tour of the great community station. I can show you everything our station and our community by extension has to offer, with exclusive access to all the areas usually restricted from public eyes, of course.
Usually, that would have sounded like an absolute blast to James. Right now, he could hardly imagine anything he wanted to do less. The conversation had started to feel almost claustrophobic a while ago, as he got the impression of being more of a hostage than a participant in it.
There we go.
Again, he threw an almost desperate look towards his companions, but it was useless. If anything, Moore seemed proud of him to be in this less than great, but presumably very prestigious situation. And he honestly didn't even know how he imagined Curie helping him out here. It didn't seem like he had much of a choice. Oh well. At least with more of a clear head, he might be able to figure out a way to use this to his advantage at some point.
Alright, let me see.
And a guided
Thread
tour of the
needle,
station
thread
was something
needle.
that he wanted to do anyway. He would just have to get over his questionable guide. How can I turn that down? He said, trying to sound the slightest bit enthusiastic. His acting skills were really letting him down right now. Again, Madame Tua seemed highly satisfied with his answer, hesitant as it may have been. On his side, James could see the captain seemed to be getting ready to speak once more, and he shot an angry look. He was this close to just telling the giant monkey to shut his face already before he got him even deeper into this. However, a tone that appeared almost angelic in that moment came to save him before he had to take action himself. There you are. I almost thought you had already run off on me, sounded Sheeta's voice over the white noise of the increasingly busy area that the crew was gathering in. James turned towards the feline's voice excitedly. He could have kissed her at that moment, and he might still later, as she was the one to finally come to his rescue. Sorry, I kind of got pulled into something here. He responded, but stopped short as his eyes fell on Sheeta, and he gave her a once over. While seemingly approaching him, Sheeta had also stopped in her tracks while looking him up and down. Completely dropping what they were doing before, both of them synchronously said, "What are you wearing?" James felt that the question was justified, at least on his end, and Sheeta looked as if she had walked through either a shop for bad medieval costumes, a punk outfitter, or maybe a silent store for fetish gear, and just worn whatever she had gotten her hands on first. Sand-coloured sandals were strapped around her silly poor-looking feet. Her legs were
Come on.
like dark.
The fuck is my good sewing needles?
It almost gave James heat stroke while just looking at them. The weirdest thing, however, was her shirt. That didn't quite fit. She was basically wearing chainmail. Actually, it looked like that was exactly what she was wearing. A cropped top made out of damn chainmail.
Eyeballs. Big eyeballs, dude.
She covered her chest and the area around her shoulders, leaving plenty of her tan striped skin exposed to moonlight. However, he didn't exactly focus on that in that moment, because she was wearing goddamn chainmail. Why was she wearing chainmail? The sight of her had actually pulled him out of the moment so much that he had almost completely forgotten about the literal elephant in the room.
If I am not mistaken, that must be your protege, Ferrimore.
Madame Tua said with a look at the newly arrived, and while she still held that presumably sweet tone, the emotional shift in her voice from when she was talking to James could have given people whiplash. Sheeta, who had apparently not paid much attention to James's surroundings as she had approached, was immediately shut up by the behemoths talking, and quickly shot into a more respectful posture.
Indeed. If I may officially introduce her, that is Petty Officer Sheeta, one of my longest subordinates,
God said, not sounding nearly as unwelcome as the High Matriarch. In fact, did James detect a hint of nervousness in his low voice now?
You have certainly talked a lot about her, Ferrimore.
Madame Tua said, while scrutinizing Sheeta with her many eyes. Sheeta, while clearly not being as horrified by the Leader Supreme as James was, clearly didn't enjoy her burning gaze and started to look nervous while being stared at. Maybe this would be a good time to use his supposedly prestigious position. Mustering his courage, James took up the word. Yeah, actually, Sheeta and I were arranged to meet here, he said, forcing his voice to be casual. Yes, firm with all the willpower he could bring up. And I hate to be rude, but we should really get going now. It would be highly inappropriate for me to make her wait. You know us humans. It has been an honor speaking to you, High Matriarch, and I am sure you will know how to reach me pertaining to our plans, but I have to take my leave now. He quickly bowed to the Colossus before turning towards Uton. Pleasure as always, Captain, he said, with a nod of his head and, not waiting for an answer or two, quickly turned and moved towards Sheeta, just about able to keep himself from running. Sheeta looked confused, but other than more, she seemed to be able to read the desperation on his face, and simply went along with it as he greeted her with their typical greeting, although his head may have touched hers a tad bit longer than usual. We should be back when you're all set up. We'll come get you and then we can have that drink we were talking about, he said to Moore and Curie, who seemed to be just as surprised about his behavior as Madame Tua appeared to be. Apparently, she still hadn't quite processed that someone had just abruptly ended the conversation with her, without her input on the matter. However, the one who tried to stop him first was Captain Uton, who loudly said,
James, you don't even know your room yet. Stop this way for a few more minutes.
James turned to the captain with a coy look. Actually, that would be necessary, he explained, while sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. I'll be getting accommodations for Sheeta and me. At that moment, he just really wanted to get out of there. However, a detail that didn't escape him was Reprieve, who perked up at his statement in the corner of his vision. The captain looked surprised, although James couldn't imagine why, as the whole ship should have known their plans by now, if the amount of gossip was anything to go by. However, Madame Tua didn't seem to have given up her apparent mission of trying to get to his good side yet.
You are right. You shouldn't make someone wait on my behalf,
She said, although James could hear the dishonesty oozing out of that statement.
but may I recommend you a lovely place to stay if you're visited the station? With a word from me, I can guarantee you accommodation of the highest class.
What he wanted to say was, absolutely not. What he actually said was, thank you, High Major, but that is quite all right. I'm sure we will find something fitting on our own. He surprised himself with how confidently he said it, even if it didn't mirror how he felt at all. For now, I bid you goodbye, he continued.
Goodbye. Have a nice day and don't be strangers.
Captain Boutron responded, being the first one to concede his position. He actually sounded surprisingly accepting of the situation, all things considered. Goodbye, Captain, Sheeta said with a quick salute, and exchanged a meaningful look with the big man. As James looked into his eyes, they were proud, but had a sad sheen to them.
Ah! Ow,
Apparently
ow,
deciding
ow,
it was
ow.
best to
Shooting
cut off
pains and the
she
feet
lost
suck.
more ground than she gained. Madame Tua also said,
Very well. I will be seeing you soon then, Mr. Aldwin. And remember, you said it yourself, it is rude to make people wait for you.
it hadn't gotten past James that she had not yet directly addressed Sheeta, and was probably not going to. After saying her goodbyes, the High Matriarch merely turned her attention towards the captain, in order to pull him into a new conversation.
This is a really good model visor. Like, look at the little legs on that. Like, they're very well molded.
Before they turned towards the entrance of one of the many busy walkways snaking through the air above the big, open streets of the station.
I'll have to paint this after.
James hurried along with Sheeta for some time, not saying a word. It was a surprisingly welcome change to use a walkway that was mostly traversed by people around his size. It also was much less used than the others, as people of his size seemed to be the exception rather than the normal. Only after they had gained enough distance that he could only just about make out the forms of the captain and the Colossus, being that he would be way out of their field of vision, did he stop and sank down, putting down his suitcase and supporting himself with his bare hands on his knees, while taking deep breaths. What's wrong? Sheeta asked, with a bit more confusion than concern in her voice, and also set down her slightly weird-looking leather suitcase. Creeps me the hell out, Jay said, with a look back at the High Matriarch. Sheeta, who probably couldn't see her anymore, despite her huge form, responded, That was the Leader Supreme, wasn't it? It sure was, James confirmed, slowly catching his breath. That and my nightmares come to life, he added in his mind. Sheeta grimaced and asked, And what did she want from you? James took a moment to explain the conversation he had just had, conveniently leaving out the parts where he was a stammering mess during most of it. Sheeta waved her tail around while listening, her ears perking up every now and then as she looked at him with crossed arms. A very special guest, huh? She commented, after he was done explaining. First time I'm hearing that. James thought about that for a moment. He had just accepted the treatment in the moment, but it was indeed strange that his position suddenly seemed to have so much meaning. It's because I'm the first human to become a community citizen rather than an Earth one, he explained thoughtfully. It was a pretty big deal when I set off to work on a communal vessel, since by community standards, it pretty much makes me a sort of diplomat. However, it never really meant anything until just now. Also, I am pretty sure I still technically have Earth citizenship, as there are no laws that would even allow me to get rid of that. So, she wants to talk diplomacy? Sheeta asked, now also seemingly getting lost in thought. I guess, James answered, scratching the stubble in his cheek.
You hot yet?
Probably wants to
Yeah,
establish
you good.
good relations with Earth. Well, I think I may be the wrong guy for that. The whole diplomat title really is more honorary than anything else. I don't have any actual influence.
Nope,
Then,
not hot enough
I
yet.
guess you'll just have to find out. Sheeta finally said with a shrug, and picked her suitcase back up.
Shit to heat up.
Yeah, James mused, looking over to her and also getting ready to continue walking. After only a few wordless steps, she had apparently remembered that her most burning question hadn't been answered yet. But Seriously, James, what are you wearing? She asked in a bemused tone, looking him up and down once more. James also looked down at himself. He could see nothing wrong. Look who's asking, he replied mockingly, looking at the crime against fashion that Sheila was clad in. Not that it didn't suit her, though. Now, whatever could you mean with that? Sheila said challengingly, and gave him a sharp look. However, she had started it, so he wasn't going to back down now. What do I mean? He said exaggeratedly, and brought one hand up to point at her. You are wearing chainmail, for goodness sake. Sheila looked down at the metal covering her chest area. Well, yeah, she said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I'm on leave. It's the only time I get to show off at all, so I'm going to use it. Her tone almost suggested that she was a bit disappointed that her showing off didn't seem to impress James at all. Changing her tune, she brought the conversation back on James's outfit. And what about you? She said, and now pointed at his clothes. You're on vacation. What's with the rags of cloth? Planning to work here or something? James was taken aback. Sure, his clothes weren't anything fancy, but calling them rags was a bit harsh. I feel like we're both missing some context here, he summarized.
Was this an original?
Looking down at the buttons on his shirt.
Oops.
Well, for context, you look like the guy who enters the trash,
Oopsie.
she just said blatantly, stepping closer to him and extending one of her claws to lift up onto the buttons. And you look like the cover girl on some third
Well,
rate
too late
music
now.
album, James said, lifting his arm to let his hand glide along the back of the chain shirt. He went with that rather than with cover of a smart magazine. At least the mail seemed to be very well fabricated. Well, I guess I am eye-catching then, Sheila said triumphantly, and started to strut while walking alongside him, probably pretending to be some kind of model. Can't deny that, James laughed, while watching her exaggerated movements. Every now and then, her body swayed enough that the mail slipped a bit, revealing the tight top she was wearing underneath it, probably to prevent chafing. Watching her, something else also came back to his mind. By the way, I forgot to give you something earlier, he said, deliberately casual. Sheila's ears perked up, twitching slightly. Give me something, she asked interestedly. What is it? Usually this wouldn't have been his style, but he decided to make an exception for now, as he reached over and put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her in and pressing a big kiss on her cheek. Sheila squirmed surprisingly in his grasp, trying to push herself away, and as soon as he had let her go again, she immediately started wiping her cheek, trying to get the remnants of the sun gesture off of her face. What was that for? She said, annoyedly. James smiled at her earnestly and asked, That was for saving me earlier. Sheila looked at him
Are
silently.
you hot enough yet?
Slowly, her hand wiping away at her cheek started to slow down, as she apparently slowly realized what kind of gesture the kiss had been for James. Next time, warn me first, she said bashfully, her hand starting to rub her neck instead of her cheek. I promise, James laughed, jokingly putting his hand on his heart. After a few more steps, Sheila looked around and asked, By the way, where are we going? James also looked around. They had apparently entered a different commercial area of the station. It looked like they were surrounded by an even pattern of different restaurants and other food-related shops, interspersed between what looked like specialty shops for all kinds of plants with humidity.
God damn it,
No
my
idea,
feet hurt tonight.
James said, looking over the many signs describing the names of different establishments in galactic uniform and their native language. I was following you, actually. Maybe we could have planned this better. Sheila wondered out loud, while also letting her eyes search their immediate surroundings. Yeah, my bad, James admitted. I just really wanted to get out of there. Sheila shook her head, making her wild hair rustle. It's fine, I get it, she said. Then she pointed downwards towards a wall of different shops and continued with a smile. Want to think about what to do next down there? James followed the direction of her pointing with his eyes. He immediately knew what she meant. As the sign of one of the smallest shops, wedged in between a music shop and a fancy-looking electrical store, read, We buy and sell artifacts from Death Worlds. Shaking his head in disbelief, James logically agreed, and they quickly made their way back down towards the shop fronts, dodging and weaving their way through the other occupants of the station.
Yep, I
once
think
they had
this
left
was an
their
original Care
designated
Bear.
walkway.
No,
Looks a lot mustier up
Too
close,
shiny.
Sheeta commented, as they stood in front
Can't
of the
tell.
shop. She wasn't wrong.
I have one
The
upstairs. I
sofa was
really should
basically
check it.
blank metal that looked like it could very much use a polishing sometime soon, with the big sign just hanging over the truly huge door. Clearly, the buildings on this station didn't follow the same standards as the ones from the GES, which was understandable when James thought back to the massive form of its leader. Ladies first, James suggested, gesturing for Sheeta to take the lead. Sheeta scoffed and approached the gate, which opened automatically once she had reached a certain distance from it. James loyally trotted after her, and together they entered the comparatively small shop. Just like it would on Earth, a sound rang out through the room as they entered, altering the distracted clerk to their presence. They were a lanky being, and clearly evolved from a flying reptile with their arms still being formed into large cell-like wings. Their head was pointy, and their mouth had the form of a curved cricket bat, with teeth sticking out wildly from both jaws. As James and Sheeta walked towards the middle of the room, the clerk's cross-shaped pupils of their orange eyes fell onto the two of them and widened for a moment. Ah, welcome, dear human and Vinyat, they said enthusiastically, rubbing the two useful fingers on the end of both their wings together. Looking to sell something? Or are you interested in artifacts on your worlds? Or from others? James wasn't quite comfortable with just how enthusiastic the clerk addressed and struggled to form an answer. Sheeta, on the other hand, answered without any hesitation. We're just browsing, in a tone that made pretty clear that she wouldn't appreciate any follow-up questions. James took that as an order and actually started browsing the items at the store, at least those that he could see from his height. Many of them were displayed on higher pedestals, with the option to climb up a ladder next to them. He decided against taking up that offer. Humans and Viat are some of my favorite guests, the clerk commented, and James made sure to avoid any eye contact with them. They always carry so much stuff with them, and they are always looking to make some money. Do they think profiling their customers would make them more likely to engage into commerce with them?
Yep.
I see what you mean, Sheeta said, while standing in front of very full racks of clothing. The passers-by had really been willing to part with it to make a few extra bucks during their stay. James lazily eyed some of the items, most of which seemed either mundane, like all different kinds of cutlery in many different forms, or
Oh, my
completely
foot is
incomprehensible,
killing me.
like a
Jesus.
round ball with
Ow.
buttons sticking out of its dull ends, with others already being pressed in. Some sort of logic game, maybe? The description of Tashard sphere from planet Tashard didn't exactly help much either. Well, at least he had learned that the Miat on Lumnia used forks and knives to eat, just like they did on Earth, even if they were formed a bit weirdly. Hey, James, this one says it's from Earth, Sheeta yelled over to him, causing him to look up. Well, the clerk had already said that he traded with humans a lot, so that wasn't much of a surprise. However, he still humored Sheeta, and stepped over towards her. And now it was his eyes that widened. Sheeta had presumably just seen a nice shiny thing, and wanted to know what it was. However, seeing James's reaction had apparently fully awakened her curiosity. What is it? She asked nosily. The clerk also looked very interested in James's reaction. Something that shouldn't be here, James answered quietly, throwing a look at the clerk over his shoulder. He tried to mask his surprise as interest. In front of him, protected in a glass box, laid a captain's marble sword. The insignia on it were clear. It belonged to the captain of a ship of the Martian Self-Defense Fleet. The steel handle was decorated with patterns of red copper, showing an image of a starry night eclipsed by the red planet. The sheath was also decorated with copper, and the polished metal reflected the light of the room in a sheen across its surface. The description merely read, "Sword from Earth," not doing it any justice at all. How did they even get their hands on this? Was some Martian captain really desperate enough to sell it? He could hardly imagine it. Without even thinking, he asked, "How much for this?" The clerk quickly looked down at the computer in front of him, pressing some buttons. The number of buttons being pressed made James sure that the clerk had decided to change the price on the spot, based on James's reaction. While the clerk clicked away, James stared at the sword. He wasn't especially attached to the human military, but this wasn't some random item. This being in the possession of somebody could have serious consequences down the line. Maybe it was a weird sense of diplomatic duty that made him ask for his prize. Or maybe it was some hidden urge to arm himself after his earlier encounter had left him shook. That would be 56,760 UC, the clerk answered, apparently deciding not to actively try and sell it to James, maybe fearing to lose him as an already convinced customer. Not cheap. Definitely not cheap, but nowhere near the actual worth of the sword. She'd have made a semi-impressed sound hearing the price of the item. If only she had known that it was probably worth more than 10 times the asking price. I'll take it, James said, causing Sheeta to look at him surprisedly. You sure? He asked. Looking at what must not have been much more than a piece of
It's
metal.
only 11. Keep going.
That's quite a bit of money. James looked him in the eyes as he answered, I'm aware. As he stepped over towards the counter, the clerk was already lowering down a small device of his level. Its surface was covered with the same pink, organic material that had made up the bioscanner that held the doors in the GES locked. Lowering his hand on the tablet-looking device, a blue screen on its upper half asked him to confirm the amount. Recognizing his genetic makeup as well as his fingerprints and vital signs, it had immediately connected to his bank account. He confirmed the amount on the screen, and just like that, the payment was completed. The clerk was very happy with the exchange, walking out from behind the counter to open the showcase and hand James his newly acquired possession. Most likely they thought that they had pulled a fast one at James, not realizing the extent of their mistake. The sword was light in James's hands, but even in the low gravity he could feel how well balanced it was. He pulled a tiny bit of the blade out of his sheath, looking at the true craftsmanship of the weapon. Sure, the decorations were nice, but the blade was the true marvel. A darker than usual colour of the steel hinted at its true nature. James knew it to be caused by a precise pattern of carbon nanotubes running through this special alloy steel. He sheathed the weapon again, once he had looked at it for long enough. It has been a pleasure doing business with you, the clerk said, rubbing his fingers again. Can I help you with anything else? Or maybe you, miss? Being surprised the clerk stopped.
Come on, you fucker, get out. There we go.
James was willing to spend so much money on for a whim. So they quickly said a goodbye to the clerk and left the store. Sorry. James immediately apologized. The store had closed behind them. I guess I've ruined the planning again. Sheeta impatiently waved off his apology. Never mind that now, she said, and tried to get a better look at the sword that James had fastened through one of the thankfully wide belt loops of his shorts. What is it? James laughed. I think I'd rather explain it over a drink and in peace later, he said, looking around at the people passing him constantly, most of them eyeing the two Death Warders suspiciously. That is, assuming that we ever find a room, of course. Sheeta looked around. I'm sure we'll find something, she said confidently, although she sounded way less sure of that statement than she let on.
Okay.
It wasn't quite so easy in the end. It turns out we have no idea what exactly you are looking for, or where it could be. Searching something is quite hard at the end. Add to that the different kind of establishments of the GCS all looked pretty unfamiliar to either of them. You get two Death Warders and a complete set. After they had explored the station for quite some time already, she started to show first signs of exhaustion. James wasn't in the same boat there, still having plenty of energy, but he did start to feel nature's call. Luckily, bathrooms weren't quite as hard to find as hotels, so they decided to make a quick stop at a place that looked like a coffee shop. Maybe it was something entirely different, but they did sell beverages there, so that would have to be enough. James excused himself once they had found a table that wasn't occupied yet. He could see Sheila climb on top of it and wave over a waiter, while he was on his way to the sanitary area. Using the non-earth toilets, even the ones specifically designed for bipeds on the sides, this was an adventure. Probably because they were also meant to be used by people with much more complicated anatomies than his own, including a variety of tables, for example. So they were formed almost like mangers, and can be closed up on top of the people's nut. There was some technique to using it as a human, but James had thankfully already mastered it. Once he had taken care of business, so to speak, He went over to the row 6 to wash his hands. Absent-mindedly, he started humming while letting the water flow over his hands. Behind him, he could hear the flush, shortly followed by one of the stools opening. Lightfoot stepped out of it and came to a halt almost immediately after. "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. I don't believe this." A slightly muffled but clearly artificially enhanced voice boomed out from behind James, making him shoot around. It hadn't spoken galactic uniform. Someone was calling out to him in English.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for watching. How am I gonna do this? Do you just bring up 16? Nope, of course not.
It's time to spruce up your yard with help from Home Hardware's Backyard Savings Sale.
Save 10% on select K-Can vinyl siding and save 20% on Beauty Tone Signature interior and exterior paint. Only at Home Hardware and Building Centers. Here's how.
I hate advertisements I can't skip.
It's
Oh my god.
gooey goodness.
From a few pages of Galactic History, Volume 332. Introduction.
Okay, nope, that's not it. Nope, come on now. Oh, yeah.
Surprised, James looked at the person that had stepped up behind him, the face obscured by the tinted face window of the mask covering their face. Even though he had been told that humans frequented the station in a way, he had not expected to actually meet one. Hey. He awkwardly greeted his fellow man, scanning them for any identifying features with his eyes. Apart from their mask, they were wearing a plain shirt and jeans. "Hey there! Well, ain't this a surprise to get to see a friendly face among all them Xenos?" The artificially amplified voice rang out again, and the figure waved at him excitedly. It sounded mad, although James couldn't be sure of that. It was hard getting a read on the person without being able to see their face. "They're not Xenos, they're..." James immediately started before thinking better of it and just stopping it there, shaking his head. Even though it would probably have been in character for their respective species, he really didn't want to start a fight with the first human he met outside of their own territory. "Well, anyway," the person said, clearly trying to gloss over his comment. "My name is William, but I usually go by Will. It's nice to meet you." He extended his hand towards him, allowing James to see that his skin seemed to have probably been very well tanned, if it hadn't been burned to a more unhealthy red shade right now. "I'm James." He cordially introduced himself, but instead of grabbing his hand, he nodded towards the seats behind him, seeing as Will had just gotten out of one of the stalls. "Right, my bad," Will said, pulling back his hand and walking past him in order to wash his hands. James watched him inquisitively during his mundane task, reflecting on the fact that he was the first of his kind he had met in months. It always felt nostalgic, even if it was weird admitting that. "By the way, how come you're not wearing a gas mask thingamajig?" Will distractedly asked while rinsing off his hands. "Ain't we supposed to keep them on as long as we're near Xenos?" Biting his lip before he could make another comment on the human's choice of words, James picked his words carefully, making sure to try and not sound like some sort of elitist while answering. "You mean a breath filter?" he asked, really wondering how somebody could forget a name as easy as that. "I don't need one. I'm considered safe, so my situation is a bit different." "Right," Will simply replied, making James unsure if he had actually listened to him, and after drying his hands, once again reached out to James, who firmly shook his hand this time. "Well, It's nice to meet you, James. Likewise, James replied. Not yet sure if that was a lie or not, although it was in a way exciting to meet a human again. For a moment they looked at each other. James's reflection staring back at him from the tinted plastic of Will's mask, while he didn't exactly know what to say now. So, the masked man finally spoke back up after things had apparently gotten on with him. You wanna come along and say hi to the guys? First drinks on me. He went up with his voice while saying that, implying that he was making a real tempting offer. Even though he didn't quite know what to make of Will so far, hanging out with some strange Smurf did sound nice, which was weird considering that it wouldn't usually have been one of his favourite things to do. Was being away from Earth having more of an effect on him than he had anticipated? Actually, I've got somebody waiting for me as well, James said dutifully, really not wanting to make Sheeta wait any longer than necessary, even if the offer was intriguing. So I probably should go back to her, but thank you for the offer. Ooh, here we your lady, are we? Will commented mockingly, and took James's rejection as a sign that it was time to leave the bar for now. Well, I really don't want to get in your way if that's the case, but you two could always join us together. James followed the masked man towards the door, musing about the suggestion. Maybe he shouldn't make that decision by himself. I'm not so sure if that would be a good idea, he said thoughtfully, as Will held the door open for him. I'll have to ask her. Fair enough, Will replied, holding the door open for James and indicating for him to go first. James thanked him with a nod as he passed him.
Like, this is one of the
It
new
didn't slip
ones.
past him that Will was very keen on keeping an eye on him while he traversed
The
the
eyes are
room.
the same.
If he had to guess, the man was most likely eager to get a good look at this supposed lady that James was returning to now. Deciding to not let it bother him, James quickly returned to his table, climbing on top of it next to Sheeta, who had apparently already ordered 2 glasses of water and ice for them. You sure took your time. She welcomed him back unceremoniously, taking a sip of the cool fluid, while drops of condensation ran down the side of the glass while she was holding it. I got held up, James replied, also picking up his glass, the cold immediately biting into his fingers as he held it. Before he took a sip himself, he lifted the drink to eye height and jokingly asked, Your treat? While looking at Sheeta. Well, you are already paying for everything else, she said, with a slight smirk back at him. Amused, James finally took a drink, and boy did it feel good. The icy fluid immediately started to cool him down while it ran down his throat, introducing moisture back into his system. No way! A familiar amplified voice suddenly ran out behind him, causing both him and Sheeta to turn and look at his source, just in time to see Will climbing on top of their table. Apparently, he had followed James a bit longer than he had anticipated. Sheeta looked back and forth between James and the new arrival, her eyes clearly asking, Somebody you know? James shrugged in her direction awkwardly before turning his attention to Will. Anything you still needed, Will? He asked the man hesitantly. He had wanted to bring the subject up to Sheeta in a gentler way. After all, she should be prepared for how other humans may react to her, if she was to interact with them. However, the masked figure ignored him, slowly moving towards Sheeta while keeping his eyes locked on her. Sheeta looked at Will distrustfully, and James really didn't like the direction in which this situation was heading. Once he had gotten almost uncomfortably close to Sheeta, making her lean away from the strange masked man approaching her, Will reached out, grasping at Sheeta's ears, as if he had to make sure they were actually real by touching them. Sheeta was having none of it, and decidedly moved her head away from his hand, folding back her ears and letting out a sharp hiss with bare teeth in the process. However, James's reaction was even faster than hers, as he almost instinctively, forcefully grabbed Will's wrist in midair, twisting the man's arm back in a most likely painful angle, while holding it in a tight grip. Will let out a pained grunt, snapping out of his fixation and looking at his assailant surprisedly, as he was forced to awkwardly lean backwards in order to avoid further pain from his arm. James just looked back at him, his hand remaining tightly locked around the man's wrist. All right, man, I get it. No touching. Will finally pressed out between pained breaths, half-heartedly struggling against James's grip, while presumably also trying not to anger him further with any real resistance. Completely unrelated, since she couldn't have been understanding what the man had been saying, Sheila also spoke up now, sounding almost a bit amused with her body language, having relaxed again. I think he got the message. Looking back and forth between her face and Will's mask for a second, James probably let go, released his grip, causing Will's arm to suddenly come loose, making him stumble forward from his awkward position. He caught himself with a hasty step forward and immediately started rubbing his aching wrist with his other hand. James also held up his hand, looking at the appendage as if it had acted on its own accord, even though he knew that not to be true. From outside of his vision, he could hear footsteps approaching quickly. You okay, Will? A new amplified voice rang out from beside the table, as what James assumed to be Will's crewmate rapidly approached them. Hey, what the hell is your problem? That second part was probably directed at him. James looked over at the two new arrivals, scaling the side of the table to console their comrade. He wasn't quite sure if they had seen the spectacle or if Will had waved them over before they climbed atop the table. To be completely fair, even if James had to admit that he used a lot more force than necessary, the only thing really wounded should have been Will's pride. One of the two humans, the one that had spoken, was smaller than Will, and looked and sounded like a very peeved young woman to James, while the other one who had remained silent so far was bigger than Will, yet still smaller than James, and had a more calm, calculating aura to them. Hey, I'm talking to you. The high voice of the woman rang out once more. She had by now made sure that Will most likely really was more embarrassed than he was hurt, and now got ready to stamp over towards James. However, she did not get further than one step in his direction, before she was stopped by the taller one of her two companions, who grabbed her arm without saying a word. The mask made it hard to see, but James was sure that the person was staring at the sword still fastened to his hips, or holding her back. Calm down, Reka, Will spoke up, as the woman tried to break her arm free for the man's hold with rod jabs. To be honest, this was my own fault. James looked at the man, who he had apparently not given enough credit as a person, as he had to admit now. Your fault? What's that supposed to mean? The woman called Reka responded unimpressed, still trying to free herself to no avail. Come off it already, you're making a scene. The third person holding her finally said strictly, and pulled her in towards him with a single move with their arm, looking her dead in the face before letting go of her, causing Reka to stumble for a second. They weren't wrong. While most of the patrons hadn't cared much about James's and Will's little struggle, they had most certainly noticed the woman yelling across the entire room. Many unwelcome eyes were on the group of Death Warders now. However, he decided to accept the olive branch that Will had extended to him and said, No, she's right, I should apologize. He then turned to Will, directly addressing the man as he said, I overreacted. Sorry, Will. Will looked back at him unsurely while shaking out his wrist. Nah, it's fine. I should have known better than to go around trying to touch a girl, he finally replied bashfully, and rolled the back of his head with his healthy hand. Reka still didn't seem satisfied with that and lashed out again. Well, there still is no reason to. However, she was interrupted again by the taller, still nameless figure, who finally said, Just let it go, Reddy. He said he's sorry. She looked at the man angrily and apparently got ready to argue with him, as Sheila reinserted herself into the conversation. Is everything all right? She asked, having taken up a supportive stance at James's side by now. It must have been disconcerting for her to not understand what was being said. Reka looked away from her companion for a moment, and was seemingly immediately stunned to silence when her eyes fell on the owner of the new voice in the conversation. Apparently being hell-bent on confronting James, she had not quite registered his company before. Her whole demeanor seemed to change in an instant. She stopped in her movement and stiffened up, suddenly standing as tall as she could and puffing her chest forward. Was she afraid? No. This was different. We're working it out, he answered Sheila in a calming manner, extending one hand to console her by rubbing his back along her arm. Yeah, we're all good now, all peachy. How about you? Reka chimed in, now also speaking GU, and completely changing her tune from before. She sounded a lot more awkward than confrontational now, and eagerly tried to wave Sheeta's question off. James wondered if she actually realized what she had just said. Sheeta, understandably, didn't seem convinced. I guess I might as well introduce us, James said to Sheeta, before switching back to English while addressing the human group. Maybe let's start this again. My name is James Alwyn, and this is Petty Officer Sheeta of the GES-32. And just to get this out of the way, yes, she is a cat girl. A Miette from Doomia, to be precise. Let's not be weird about this. To his surprise, it was the yet unnamed person who responded instead of Will. I am Ortal Baranzi. The man introduced himself, putting his hand on his chest. Then, pointing at each of his companions, he continued the introductions. And these two are Will Jones and Rhaegar Farkas. Sorry about the misunderstanding. The man sounded calculated and formidable, and his body language oozed confidence. Clearly someone who knew exactly what he was doing. No bad blood, right, James? Will chimed in, and James nodded agreeingly. Rhaegar didn't further acknowledge the introductions, instead making a step towards Sheeta before asking, So, are you two here together? GU. While asking, she leaned her head in even closer towards Sheeta, and her tone was one that was trying very hard to sound natural. From the all-over reactions, she seemed to be the only one speaking it, at least on a conversational level. Sheeta had to give it to her. She was getting straight to the point, and honestly, he could respect that. He decided that Sheeta would probably be occupied with that for a bit and returned his attention to the two men in front of him. It would be tired to keep up a conversation in two separate languages anyway. Will had a relieved aura around him. His shoulders started to relax and his arms hung almost limp down his sides. Apparently he was just glad that this whole thing was resolved. James really should have given him more credit earlier. Ortal, on the other hand, didn't open up like that. Still seemingly wary of the situation, if only a little bit. With a nod towards James's hip, he spoke back up. No offense. You seem a bit young to be a captain. Will turned his head towards his companion confusedly. So apparently, unlike James and Ortal had, he hadn't recognized the sword. James nodded, pulling the sheathed sword out of his belt loop and holding it up. That's because I'm not. He confirmed the man's suspicion while showing off the polished weapon. This is nothing but a souvenir. I will have to get back to some sort of embassy soon. Actually, I just picked it up. Will looked at the sword, probably with big eyes, even if they weren't visible through the mask. Ortal, on the other hand, seemingly tried to keep eye contact with James, which also was rendered utterly useless by the tinted plastic. He then nodded, seemingly accepting James's explanation for now. James quickly secured the sword again. So, what brings you guys to the station? He asked, as the conversation seemed to have come to a grinding halt.
There we go.
Behind him, you could hear tidbits of the conversation the two women were having. At least Rhaegar seemed to be a lot more communicative about her desire to touch Sheeta's ears than Will had been. It didn't seem to win her points with the feline, though. Well, we were here on some business, but we're basically already leaving again, Will answered with a casual shrug. James guessed that he probably had left out what some business was exactly on purpose. This is our last day here, so it's pretty lucky that we ran into each other. What about you? James scoffed.
Oh, hello.
I'll leave it to you to decide how lucky our encounter was, he replied casually. We're just here on a pit stop before taking on the next great expanse. Will popped his head back, but Ortal seemed to understand. GES. You're serving on an expedition ship, right? He asked. Sure do, James answered, nodding. Then he reached up with his left hand, rubbing his neck and corrected, Well, actually, I'm just working. She's serving. With that, he nodded towards Sheeta. From what he could hear of her talk, he wasn't quite sure if she was expertly ignoring Rhaegar's advances, or if she was actually oblivious to them. However, as he had reached up earlier, Will seemed to have spotted something. With a nervous undertone, he inquired, Say, James, what's that there on your arm? He pointed at the area in question, and James looked down at it. Scratches, he replied dryly, while holding up his scarred forearm so Will could take a better look at it. Will let out a nervous chuckle. That wasn't her, was it? He asked further while pointing at Sheeta. James now understood his nervousness. Of course it was, he said, and thought about it for a moment before adding. I won't claim that was my goal either, but I guess what I did is one of the better fates your uncle has suffered. Funny how things work out sometimes. Apparently, Rhaegar had also heard that exchange, turning to see what it was they were talking about. She immediately took the opportunity to escape the one-on-one conversation, stepping up next to James and rubbing up against him, chuckling softly as she did. As always, James repeated the sound back at her, and he could swear that he could almost hear Reka sulking under her mask. So, what are you guys talking about? She'd asked, eager to get a new conversation going before the old one could pick back up. You ripping up my arm, James soberly explained, seeing Reka's head shift, which presumably meant she was also looking at his arm now. For the record, that was your fault, Sheeta said sardonically, poking against his shoulder with one finger. That's not what you said back then, James countered, looking at her over his shoulder. No, it's what you said, Sheeta responded back. And I like your version better. Of course, the only one that seemed to understand their little exchange was Reka, and her two crewmates could only look at her for translation as they witnessed the strange display of affection without context. She gave the gist of it back to them, not seeming too enthusiastic about recounting what she heard. Ortal and Will exchanged obscured looks with each other, before Will apparently decided to just accept the state of things between his new acquaintances. So, if you're just here in transit, what are you going to do for your time here? He asked, supporting with a gesture since they couldn't see his face. James shrugged. Rest and relax, I guess, he gave back. For a moment he thought about whether or not he should tell them about the meeting with the Leader Supreme he had been roped into, but he decided against it. That would open a whole other can of worms. We're actually looking for a place to stay right now. This seemed to take Ortal by surprise. Aren't you getting rooms provided by your commanders? The stoic man asked inquisitively. James sheepishly looked at Sheeta, who, of course, was once again shut out of the conversation with the language barrier. He still clung to his shoulder for the moment. Of course, they had their very own classified reasons why they needed a separate accommodation. However, the alleged reason they were doing so wasn't exactly all show either. We're looking for something a bit more cozy, he admitted, with a turning look towards the group of humans. Away from the co-workers, you know. He had no idea what any of the people in front of him looked like, and their reactions were, of course, hidden from his eyes. However, with his current understanding of each of them, his mind did the emoting for them. Will's face was most likely morphed into a dirty grin by now, and he probably raised a single eyebrow as he cocked his head aside and leaned forward towards James. James imagined Ortal would slightly lift his eyebrows, mimicking the slight upward motion of his head, and otherwise not acknowledge what had just been said. And Reka would probably try to not let it show that she would much rather not have gotten that information. Her shoulders slumped down, and a turn of her head told him that she was the only one not directly looking at him anymore. Actually, we just wanted to take a short break here before we kept on looking for a fitting place. James finished his explanation. To his surprise, Will let out a sly laugh at that, reminding James very much of a shady businessman. Looking? Well, you needn't look no more, friend, he said, stepping up to James and reaching out to put a hand on his shoulder that wasn't currently occupied. Your friend Will has a solution for you and your lady friend. James and Sheeta both looked at him bemusedly as he tapped James's shoulder twice before he kept talking. Now, here's what we're going to do, the man said in a half whisper, as if he was trying to keep whatever he was going to say secret. Was very bad at it. You can't get out of here with us. We take one of them suspension rails up there. We drive it till we reach the 96th district. There we get out. And you come with us to a place called Roof Hack Hive. James had to butt in, looking at Will bewilderedly. Wait, did you say hive? He asked. Will raised his free hands and waved his open palm back and forth as a stopping gesture. Now, I know what that sounds like, but hear me out, he said, in a conciliatory tone. Yes, they're a hive. Them buggers come from a death world just like us. The best thing I can compare them to is termites, even if they look nothing like them. Anyway, due to their special needs, they didn't just set up an embassy on the station, but an entire hive. Attached facilities and all. That includes hotel-like accommodation. That's a really common thing. And I know, we humans kind of have this whole thing about spawns and hive creeps and stuff, but who knows fucking hell? These guys ain't about consuming or assimilating. They're all about working. For them, working is their life, and them bugs are super happy with that. Slowly, James started to get behind what he was saying. So, we'll get Class A service there because caring for their guests is literally just what they do, is what you're saying, he concluded. Will he nodded. Anything that helps the hive, he said. Well, why would this arm around again? And happy guests mean more guests mean more money for the hive. James thought about that for a moment before turning to Sheeda and quickly giving her the rundown of Will's suggestion. While he talked to her in a harsh tone, Rekka spoke up. We discovered them during our first stay here on accident, she explained. There was a big event going on back then, and pretty much everything was sold out. But apparently, not even a temporary housing crisis could convince most people to check in there. We were so blown away that we stay there every time we're on the station. Willow nodded and eagerly continued her explanation. Which is also why them buggers love humans. Apparently, people will actually get desperate enough to not really give a shit where they're staying has been a godsend for them. And when humans get good service, they usually come back. During their explanation, James got done relating the information to Sheeda. From her reaction, it seemed like she felt a very similar way about this as he did. Weirded out, yet intrigued. Even Autumn nodded now while folding his arms.
Alright, yep, I'm done.
The rooms are clean, the
I've
service
got
is exceptional.
A couple
the
of
price
things
is
done
obviously
tonight,
laughable, so
and
be sure to
90%
leave
of the some
Joe's
other
tip when
things,
you
so
go
I'm
there.
gonna call it a
It's
night.
alright.
I'm gonna go to bed a little bit early. Alright, thanks for stopping by. Y'all have a good night. Yep, there's football times then.